Do you remember a couple, maybe it was last week, uh, Christian hate preacher Jack Hibbs? He made headlines last week because he had delivered an invocation in the U.S. Congress. I wrote an article about it. I talked about this last week, but this guy delivered an invocation in front of the U.S. House, and he should not have been there. And I'll get into why he shouldn't have been there in a second. But he gave an invocation in January. Last week, a handful of congressional Democrats wrote a letter to Mike Johnson, the speaker, and the head of the chaplaincy office, basically, in the House, saying, why did you allow this guy to speak when he doesn't even fit the rules you have set for who can give invocations? They were really mad about this. And also, the reason I'm bringing this up is that, of the many things they cited in that letter, Jack Hibbs, this preacher, he has said that Biden administration is pure, Christless, godless evil. He said Kamala Harris wasn't really a Christian at all. He said sin is deadlier than COVID, so which was justification for him to downplay COVID. And so this is why they sent the letter. Like, why are you letting this guy speak in Congress at all? Meanwhile, you have said no to other people who are actually qualified to do that task. So on Sunday, after I made that video, on Sunday, Jack Hibbs responded to a lot of this when he gave his sermon at Calvary Chapel Chino Hills in California, his church. And near the end of his hour-long sermon, Jack Hibbs put up a scan of the letter on the big screen behind him so he could mock it. And I'm gonna play a bit for you right here because he spends part of this just saying like, wow, I didn't know I was such a bad person, everybody. Here's what he said. Let me play this for you, then I'll talk about it.
And they went on to crucify House Speaker Mike Johnson and me. I didn't know. I'll sign autographs later, I guess. I didn't know that I helped start January 6th riot. Did you know that? I didn't know that. I didn't know I hate Muslims. Found out that I do. Did you know I hate Jews? I didn't know that. Did you know that I hate LBGTQ, LMNOP, throw it all? I'm a huge hater. Next page. Oh, that's just one page.
Yeah. So this is how we know he's a liar, because he didn't notice he's not reading the congregation any of that stuff. He's not reading them the letter because the letter cited exactly why they had a problem with him. He just told them, oh, they mischaracterized me. They called me anti-whatever. And how dare they? You know I'm not. For what it's worth, he said, I didn't know I helped start the January 6th riot. No one accused him of starting it. What he did do is defend it, because the letter quotes him as saying, this is what you get when you eject God from the courts and from the schools. He said, I didn't know I hate Muslims. The letter cites him calling Islam, quote, a demonic doctrine being propagated by heretics. He said, did you know I hate Jews? He says Jews in Israel could avoid the wrath of Hamas if they just turned to Jesus. That's what the letter says about him. And he's like, can you believe they said, I hate you? Like, no, you didn't read them the evidence, buddy, on purpose, because you know it's true. And then, of course, he's like, did you know I hate LBGTQLMNOP? Like he's doing a Dave Chappelle joke. And like, yeah, the fact that you just add on extra letters at the end shows how little respect you have for them. By the way, speaking of, does he hate LGBTQ people? He once claimed that if evolution is true, there would be no such thing as homosexuality. He blames the existence of trans people on demonism. He says God's judgment is evident through LGBTQ characters on the children's show Blue's Clues. So yeah, he hates LGBTQ people and all these other groups. He spreads lies about them, and then he walks it back when he's speaking to his congregation without telling them everything. But then he says the consequence of being targeted like this, because again, moral of the story, as we've seen all night, Christians love to be pretend persecuted. They always love to act like they're being persecuted even when they have all the power. And he said, you know what? I think the IRS is going to investigate me for this, which is not how anything works. But he also, this is just weird. It's a tangent, but I'm going to tell you anyway. He also said in the sermon, I want you all to know I haven't watched any adult content since June 19th, 1977. He said that explicitly. He hasn't watched any adult content since 77, which, first of all, why are you keeping track of the date? Second, nobody asked. I don't know why you're volunteering it. That's a weird thing to just throw into a conversation, but congrats. I know 5 decades or something like that. Anyway, here's the bigger problem with his sermon. What I just played for you was the end of an hour-long sermon. Before that sermon began, he was doing like all the beginning of the church service stuff you just got to get through. Like, let's all pray for members of our congregation. That doesn't need to go up on YouTube later. It's just something we do as a church. And during that segment, which was live streamed on YouTube, on Facebook, but did not make it to the YouTube stream that was later put up, here's what he did. First of all, he brought up 2 members of a local school board. He's like, these are awesome people. Let's all pray for them because they're running for re-election. That's messed up. He then bragged about Donald Trump and he downplayed all of Trump's legal problems. He's like, yeah, they keep going after him with these lawsuits and he keeps winning. It's like, no, dude, he's a criminal who just got fined like hundreds of millions of dollars and we're just waiting around for the criminal convictions. He's not a good dude. Then Jack Hibbs said he's not worried about like the 2024 election because everyone's lying to you and the Democratic ticket will actually be Michelle Obama and California Governor Gavin Newsom because they love thinking Michelle Obama is going to be president and that's what all Democrats want. Michelle Obama hates politics. She's made no secret of that. This is like some fever dream of right-wing people. But then he said, all that matters when you vote is who is pro-life. And pro-life, again, means voting for the dude from the last story who like celebrates the death of trans people. That's pro-life to him. But then he did something that was really disturbing. He was talking about the California Senate election that is on the ballot. And this week on March 5th, on Tuesday, there's going to be a primary for the California Senate. And the thing is, in California, I'm going to try to give you a rundown here because this is relevant. The way this works is it's a jungle primary. Doesn't matter what party you're in. Everybody runs, and the top 2 vote getters are on the ballot in November. As it stands right now, I'm going to show you this right here. This is from 538. Here's the California Senate race as it stands today. Can you see that? Like above my head right here, Adam Schiff, a Democratic congressman, is currently leading the polls, according to 538. He'll probably make the runoff. No surprise there. He's been really outspoken about Donald Trump. He was like one of the lead prosecutors, I believe, for the Trump impeachments. So anyway, that's Adam Schiff for you. He's in the lead. There's also, right above my head, you could see Representative Katie Porter. She's the one who always has the whiteboards in subcommittee hearings, committee hearings. She's fantastic. I love her. I would absolutely vote for her if I had a chance to. So Katie Porter is there, but you could see she's in 3rd place right now. The Democrats are like splitting their votes a little bit. And what that means is if Republicans all band together, there's another guy up there. His name is Steve Garvey, who could take the 2nd spot. And Republicans really want Steve Garvey to be in that 2nd spot so that he can be on the ballot in November. Democrats, on the other hand, are kind of hoping just get Schiff and Porter as the top 2 candidates because maybe Republicans are like, there's no one for me to vote for in November, and maybe they won't vote at all. That would be good for Democrats, right? So the only question about Tuesday's primary is who's going to take the 2nd spot. Will it be Steve Garvey, the Republican, or will it be Katie Porter, the Democrat? So with that in mind, Jack Hibbs began talking about that race coming up on Tuesday, and he basically told his congregation, he told his congregation how to vote, which he can't do. That's a violation of the Johnson Amendment, which says any nonprofit group, if you want to keep your tax exempt status, you don't get to tell people how to vote. Planned Parenthood cannot say vote for Joe Biden. The NRA cannot tell you to vote for Donald Trump. They could do things like, we put out a scorecard, and like a Republican House member might say, I got an A rating from the NRA. They are allowed to do that, but the NRA cannot say go vote for that person, right? Across the board, all nonprofits. But that includes churches. Churches cannot tell you who to vote for. And Jack Hibbs knows this. So watch what he does when trying to get everybody to vote for Steve Garvey. The other thing I got to tell you, if you're not familiar, Steve Garvey, the Republican, is also famous because he used to be a Major League Baseball player. He's a very famous Major League Baseball player. He's like Herschel Walker, who ran for Senate in Georgia. He's like, what are my political qualifications? I don't know, but I can run with a football. And Steve Garvey's kind of doing the same thing. He's like, remember when I was on the Padres? I was great then in 40 years ago. Therefore, vote me as senator. Anyway, here's Jack Hibbs telling everybody to vote for Steve Garvey, and then watch what he does because he's sneaky about it.
How are you voting regarding our upcoming local vote? I want to publicly right now today encourage all of you to vote for Steve Garvey. You got to vote for Steve Garvey. It's against the law for me to, I just remember, it's against the law for me to say that in the pulpit. So, as a public citizen, Steve Garvey is not only one of the greatest baseball players of all time, but we want Steve Garvey to represent us in the Senate. And so Steve Garvey is the only guy on the ballot. So there, that was legal. I just had to move from here to there as a private citizen. And anyway, Romans chapter 8.
Like, what the hell was that? He is allowed to make any political statements he wants as a private citizen, but pretending to be a private citizen when he is in the middle of delivering a sermon that is live streamed on the church's Facebook page does not count. He knows that, which is why he played it off as a joke. You do not get to claim you are not a pastor because you walked from here to here when you're speaking to your congregation at church using the microphone attached to your lapel. So that really, truly is an IRS violation. And it's also telling that the official YouTube video started seconds after he did that. Like, if the IRS did its job, it would revoke the tax-exempt status of Calvary Chapel Chino Hills, since it clearly wants to be a political organization that runs a book club on the side. But there's no reason to think that's actually going to happen, because as we know by now, the Texas Tribune and ProPublica did a lengthy article about this in 2022. The IRS is not doing a damn thing to enforce the Johnson Amendment. Over the past 70 years, they have, as far as the public knows, only punished 2 churches, 2, for violating the rules, despite all this evidence, including video clips like this one of pastors blatantly doing the same thing. And despite having good reason to be cynical, though, the Freedom from Religion Foundation is now getting involved here. They just sent a letter to the IRS. You could see February 27th this week, basically saying, here's what Jack Hibbs did. And look what it says at the bottom here. FFRF is a registered nonprofit, 501c3. It takes this designation, along with the accompanying privileges and responsibilities, very seriously. Some churches, like Calvary Chapel Chino Hills, have chosen to make a mockery of their nonprofit status by reaping all the benefits of tax exemption while knowingly violating the statute by openly endorsing political candidates running for public office. We would like to see the IRS take action on this issue and enforce its rules for the benefit of all taxpayers. I mean, they're absolutely right about all of that. Will it happen? I don't know. I don't think anything will come of that, but for what it's worth, this is not like it's the first time this has happened where Jack Hibbs personally and his church have promoted candidates. Let me show you this. This is from a letter FFRF wrote in 2018. You know how when it's election day, you will see signs for political candidates, but if you go to a specific building to vote, you will know, oh, they can't put any signs like by the entrance. All the signs have to be like 50 feet away from the entrance as a law. You can't have political signs near a polling place. That's the law. Well, what did Jack Hibbs do? This is from 2018, Calvary Chapel Chino Hills. You could see it right there. And look at that. You have a bunch of political signs right by the entrance because they were trying to get their members to vote for those candidates. They can't do that, but they did. And in 2021, remember Gavin Newsom? Republicans were trying to recall Gavin Newsom for everything he did during COVID. And there were two questions on the ballot. One was, should we kick out Gavin Newsom? And number two, if we do kick him out, who should replace him? And there were a bunch of candidates running to replace him. And at the top of the list was a Republican named Larry Elder. And you could see from 2021, Larry Elder showed up at Jack Hibbs' church. And Jack Hibbs basically told his congregation, we got to kick out Newsom and we got to vote for Larry Elder. Like, again, more politicking in the church. And for what it's worth, during that recall, California voters overwhelmingly said, no, we do not want to kick him out. So it didn't matter who voted for Larry Elder. But anyway, the point is, this is what Jack Hibbs does. His church has also helped their members take over a local public school board, and it turned their majority, the school board majority, they turned their board meetings into church services, and they got sued and they had to pay the price for that. But like, this isn't a one-off error. Jack Hibbs knows what he is doing. It is habitual, and he's not going to stop unless the IRS forces his hand. And even if they did, you know what Jack Hibbs would do. He's like, the IRS is coming after me. I'm being persecuted. Like, no, dog, you just broke the rules, so you don't get to play the game anymore. That's it. That's what his Christian faith teaches him to do. To lie to people, to subvert the rules, to pretend like he's better than everyone else. Like, the IRS should punish him because he's going to complain about being persecuted no matter what. All right, what questions do we have here? And then I'm going to get to one last story after this, I think, to wrap it up. None of that sounds hateful, even though it was all documented in the letter. There's so many, it's not hard, as you might guess, to find examples of Jack Hibbs saying horrible things. And so much of it was cited in that letter. But of course, he doesn't share that with his congregation. He puts an image of it so it looks official and scary, but he doesn't actually read any of the things he said to his congregation because he knows it makes him look bad because he's a liar. The man is absolutely bursting with Christian love. Yeah, nothing more hateful than Christian love. Atheists know Jesus' message of love better than Christians do. And that is atheists' main complaint against Christians, that they so obviously ignore their own teachings. Like, isn't that frustrating? Like, here's atheists like, if you guys were more like Jesus, we would kind of be cool with it. Unfortunately, you're just evil and you just pretend to like Jesus. And that's our problem. We want you to be better Christians than you actually are. Though the one problem I have with that is that suggests that Christianity by default is good. And I don't necessarily buy into that, but I do get what you're saying. I wish the IRS would enforce the Johnson Amendment. For what it's worth, the FFRF, Freedom from Religion Foundation, they sued the IRS years ago for not enforcing the Johnson Amendment. And the IRS settled this out of court and they said, we'll do our job, we promise. And then the lawsuit went away because that's all FFRF wanted. And as far as we know, they still haven't enforced it. None of these big churches that bait the IRS to come after them, the IRS hasn't taken away their tax exemptions. And the reason they're baiting them is because some of these churches want the IRS to revoke their tax exempt status, because then they would sue over losing their tax exempt status, saying the government's trying to muzzle our free speech and that violates our religious freedom. And then they want to take that case to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court, as it stands, would totally say, yeah, churches can say whatever they want. And at that point, churches would just become another arm of the Republican Party. It would be a fundraising tool. It'd be a campaign stop for candidates. That's what all these churches want. And maybe that's the reason the IRS isn't going after them. So they don't have a reason to sue and ruin this, but I don't know. Can we get a class action lawsuit against the IRS for not enforcing the law? For the reasons I just said, I don't think you're going to see it. Again, there was a lawsuit. It was legit. It just didn't get anywhere because the IRS said, we're going to do it. And they haven't. But this is also why you should all be supportive of the federal government funding the IRS, as the Biden administration and Democrats have tried to do. One, because it goes after rich people who are trying to get out of paying their taxes. But two, it would allow them to hire more people so that they could pursue things like this. Is it really a violation? Can it be a violation if everyone who supposedly can enforce it looks the other way? I mean, that's the question, right? Like if a tree falls in the woods, does it make a sound and no one's, whatever, you get what I'm saying. Like, yeah, if the IRS isn't enforcing this rule, is it really a rule? Because I have to think if some liberal church told everyone to go vote for Joe Biden, I feel like the Christian right would get mad about that. If Planned Parenthood told everyone to vote for Joe Biden explicitly, I feel like the IRS would have a problem with that too. And so would Fox News and all those people. But again, the liberal groups aren't the ones who are going to do that because liberals follow the rules. Republicans break the rules as long as it benefits them. That's kind of how the game is played. We saw that with gerrymandering this week. New York has the ability to gerrymander in support of Democrats. What do? They basically create a fair map. Like, why? Why are you doing that? It's stupid. Don't do unilateral disarmament.